Thank you very much. Hang on, let me just get the mask off. Yes, delighted today to be joined for this discussion by Amanda Solloway, MP for Derby North and Science Minister for the UK government. She is also the proud adopted parent of an alpaca called Neil. Which is, I think, important for all of us to know. Also, Matt Warman, MP for Boston and Skegness, who's been Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Digital Infrastructure since July 2019. Matt once met a horse called Neil, but disappointingly, he turned out to not be very exciting. No. That's how I like to start all my sessions. Okay. Now, I think over the last year, we have really seen just how important science is, of course, and everything that's been discussed here at COGEX. I think we know just how integral AI and data is going to be to our collective future. But today, we are going to be discussing, at least in part, the big star of British science, the Advanced Research and Invention Agency, ARIA, its implications on scientific research in the UK, and the government's hopes really that it can help cement the UK's position as a global science superpower. So, okay, let's start at the beginning, yes, if we may. Amanda, what is ARIA?
Well, it's a fantastic funding agency, basically. So what it will do is will enable high risk, high reward research to take place in a very different way, so it will complement the landscape that exists, but we're doing something very, very different. And one of the key things that it will be doing is allowing failure as an example, which is a really important part of what ARIA will do, that it will allow that freedom of experimentation, but also accepting that it may well fail. And I suppose the other thing I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions, but the other thing just to really articulate is that the design or the ideas that it will be really looking at will not be decided by government, they will be decided by science. And so if you said to me, what is it that ARIA is going to do? My honest answer would be, I don't know, because it wouldn't be for me to say. Yes, absolutely, get rid of that. Because it wouldn't be right because that wouldn't be the science that we don't know. So that's the essence of ARIA. Lots more to say, obviously.
Yeah, of course. Matt, talk to me a little bit about how research, both in the technology space and perhaps also in the science space, happens at the moment. How do you think that it can be improved, and maybe what are the challenges that people find themselves fighting against?
So I think government at the moment is really good at taking what Britain is great at and putting more money into it. You can never put enough money into it, and this is very much Amanda's budget rather than mine, so I wish it would be bigger, and I'm sure she does too, but can't say it quite so publicly. But at the moment, it is very much about how many papers have you published, where is the expertise going, how do we supercharge that? What ARIA tries to do in a way that is genuinely creative is to say, well, what are the great ideas that you have got evidence for, but you haven't quite got it's not there yet. It's something that is genuinely novel and something that feels like it could be game changing. And that is something that governments around the world, the US being the honourable exception in some ways, but governments around the world have historically been really bad at, because if someone says that was taxpayers' money and it came to absolutely nothing, historically the answer is to be terribly sorry and to say, well, we should never have done that. This is about acknowledging that that's not how the real world works, but government has a real role to play, and ultimately we have significant funding opportunities that we can put into it.
I guess in many ways, then, that is copying the model from the tech sector of like fail, but fail fast, right? And then move on to the next thing.
Yeah, I mean, the crucial difference is that obviously the tech sector can do things that might make fabulous amounts of money, but are not necessarily good for the public interest. What I think ARIA is going to obviously be doing in collaboration with scientists is have slightly different criteria, but it's not something that is saying, how do we make tons of cash?
Okay, so Amanda, I know that you said that you couldn't tell us what the projects would be.
Yeah.
But could you paint us a picture, though, of I guess, I don't know, like in a really optimistic way, what kinds of things, anchor it for us, what kinds of things are you hoping will come out of this?
Well, so the way I think about this, I've got daughters, grown-up daughters, I've got a granddaughter. And I'm really excited about my daughter's future, but my granddaughter's future as well. And one of the things that I'm a great fanatic for, and I probably shouldn't admit this actually, is Star Trek. I just love it. And I really do. And wouldn't it be amazing if we had a transporter? I mean, I've driven down here from Derby today, and it's taken me about 4 hours battling my way down the motorway. But just to go, you know, I'd like to be at King's Cross. That would be fantastic. And there's nothing to that's if I'm painting a picture of what ARIA could do, there's nothing saying that it won't do that. So that's, I don't know whether that's helpful
Just
or not.
except for the laws of physics, I think. It's fair to say.
Absolutely.
But you're talking about these big ideas.
Big ideas that are that we don't know what they might be. I mean, the example, as you will know, is thinking about ARPA and the fact that we've got the internet as a result of all this work that DARPA's done. So it really is hard to articulate exactly what that will be. But I do genuinely believe that it will be for the future of my daughters, my granddaughters. I think it will be. We talk about science superpower, but this for me is about globally really having an impact, and that is genuine what I think we can do with ARIA in filling in a gap in the landscape that doesn't exist at the moment.
And when we invent flue dust, it will have a Union Jack on it. So that's great.
Sure,
We've
that's
done
just
one.
a baseline requirement.
Yeah,
Okay.
obviously.
What do you think that all of this will mean for the individual, Matt?
So all of this stuff has to have, and this is in a sense the difference that I just talked about. This isn't about a commercial return. This is about having the individual at the heart of it. So in my own brief, then we do 5G test beds. We try and say, right, 5G is a great thing that will give loads of people, is already giving loads of people in London a much faster mobile phone signal. That's lovely. It goes as far as it goes. What we've tried to do is say, how do we make it much more tangible as a platform that can deliver genuinely new things? So for instance, if you can now, thanks to some of our 5G trials, go and visit the Eden project from even Derby, in a way that is so much more like being there, is so different, and uses those new technologies. Now, it's not perfect, and it's not the only way that we want people to do tourism, of course, but it's about saying this is a new technology that is about people. And it's that, I'm sure someone else has said this, but it's that idea that industrial revolutions are not driven by technology, they're ultimately driven by people. And trying to put that in a way that is really tangible has to start off with what can you do for those people rather than what can you do with the technology.
Yeah, it's a very nice idea. I just want to pick up actually, Amanda, on what you said there about DARPA. So I know that that's sort of the inspiration really for ARIA in many ways, that opportunity to have kind of intellectual freedom, as it were. I know also that DARPA had a very distinctive military focus. I think that's probably fair to say. And I guess that it was created at a moment in history when against the backdrop of the Cold War, when the biggest questions in science about communication and satellites and rockets and things aligned with military strategy, when there was that kind of close alignment. And I just wonder, I mean, it's definitely true that when you have that warlike focus, as we've seen with COVID and vaccines, I mean, war in a sort of metaphorical way, it's really good for science. It really accelerates science. But I guess my question to you is, do you think that this analogy really extends to the big scientific questions of today, like nuclear fission and desalination and, I don't know, breaking down plastics, when you don't have that same kind of military objective?
So there's lots of points in the question that you just asked, and I think the first point I'd like to make is that within the whole R&D landscape, there are lots of really good things that are happening. And you look at UKRI as an example, or the funding that goes into lots and lots of brilliant projects. So that does exist. And so when we talk about DARPA and think about what it is that ARIA is going to do, we're looking at DARPA, but we very much want it to be unique to our landscape, because it's really important that we think about it from a UKGB sort of context. And so therefore, it may well be that it does something like fusion. It may well be that it does something that's related to the environment. But it really is down to the CEO that we're recruiting. We're just a plea out there, if you know anybody who would be interested, make sure that we get the right people, and the program managers who will be managing these programs. So it will be complementing. I see it as filling a gap that we don't have, that we're not doing at the minute, but also complementing everything that we are. And that's a really, so it may well be doing, as an example, as you say, fusion, but it may well be doing something that I don't even know that we need yet.
Yeah, I may have said fusion, I meant fission. Forgive me if I said the wrong phrase there. I guess my question really, though, is how do you know that it will work? How do you know that this is the way to get things to work?
Well, this is why it's so important that we have this capacity to fail as well. And what we will do, I mean, obviously there's quite a lot of information around about ARIA, but the way it will be a small agile funding agency, and it's important to remember, I never thought I'd say £800 million isn't a lot of money, but actually in the whole scheme of things, it's a relatively small amount that we'll be investing. And with that money, we'll have really targeted projects, and those projects will be given the right to fail, but also we will have also the right to stop the project. So if it's not going down the right route, we can at that point say, actually what we can do, we can stop and do something else. So again, that's slightly different than the funding landscape that exists.
I guess my question, in terms of whether this is definitely the right way forward, because there are other models, right? I mean, other countries have other models. The Netherlands, for example, they create it so that professors, or they have a plan that professors and lecturers and so on have kind of a rolling funding of research. I mean, I think all scientific, academics across the country will be very thankful for not having to waste the thousands of hours on sort of grant proposals and the process that exists at the moment. But why not something like they have in the Netherlands, where you sort of, I guess, trust professors to come up with these research ideas themselves?
So you've said something really important, actually, which is around how the funding will take place. And one of the things that we're doing is we've got probably, already we're doing a bureaucracy review, because I'm really keen just to have a look at the whole of the R&D landscape. However, within the ARIA, the possibility will be that it's going to be really agile, quick in the way that it funds. So what that will mean is it will be more like a venture capitalist, as an example, than something we're going through a lengthy process. And that's why it's really important that we have this. There are other things that exist to do all the wonderful things that we see in other places, all the wonderful things that we do already in this country. But this is really, it's a niche. And when you talk about the professors as an example, fantastic work. I meet people all the time, the work that's being done. However, I think it's really important that we acknowledge it may well be professors who are doing it, but it may well be somebody who works for a business down the road. That's the whole glorious beauty of our ARIA. And I do think of it as something beautiful, actually. I think it's going to be an amazing transforming gift.
Sticking on that point about the people, so I mean, the idea that it's not just within universities that you're imagining. Matt, I guess, the world is quite a different place to what it was 2 years ago. When it comes to making sure that we get the best out of research in science and technology in the UK, how can we make sure that we're attracting the best global talent?
So I think there's many more than several dimensions to that question, right? A huge chunk of what attracts people to the UK is what is already happening here, right? It's about that critical mass. It's about having that unique mixture of business, academia, sometimes government, but in large part not, coming together in a way that is genuinely open to the international community. And I think that will persist regardless of our relationship with the EU, which is sort of implicit in your question. Then London and significant pockets around the country are going to continue to be really important centres that are attractive in their own right. I don't want to go too far in the Home Office's direction, but they are looking, as you can imagine, about how, from a visa point of view, do you continue to make that attractive. They've already done some really interesting work around that. But I think the whole point about the new regime is to be open to saying, where is it that the UK needs to work that little bit harder to attract people, and how can you pull different levers? And that's what the Home Office is interested in doing, obviously working with BEIS and working with DCMS to a certain extent. You see it in some of the trade deals that we're doing already. For instance, to use a very DCMS example, then one of the most recent trade deals made it specifically easier for artists to tour in the countries that that we were talking about there. That is a particular issue around our post-EU relationship. So it shows that you can do things through the mechanism of trade deals, through the visa system, through a whole host of different things that only government can do to make it work as well as it possibly can.
Yes, so I was going to come in on that because I mean, I agree with everything that you're saying. And I think what I wouldn't want to do is underestimate the really great things that we do in this country already. And I think it's about really attracting talent to come here. And as you say, there are practical things that we can do around visas. There's practical things that we can do about celebrating our success. But also one of the things that I'm working on at the moment is around a people and culture strategy. And it just seems really important to me that what we do is we really just embrace everybody here and invite people to come to this country. And there's loads of things that we're going to be looking at within this. And it's around, as an example, longevity of careers, really enabling career breaks to happen, enabling people to go from being a professor in university to working in industry, as an example, making sure that we hit the diversity, making sure we have all that diversity represented. And also, and you may again have heard me say this before, bullying and harassment, absolutely not acceptable. And we're really wanting to make sure that we have excellent leadership that will eradicate that. So I think there's loads of things. And I think if we really get that out to globally and internationally that this is what we're doing, then inevitably, I don't think it's always, I think visas really help. I think money attracts, but I think let's just celebrate the great things that we do. And that also will hopefully bring people here.
I really like that idea of opening out the doors and making the boundaries between places kind of slightly softer. On that point, actually, I think that I think it's fair to say that in the last certainly 5 years, the tech sector has, I think, really woken up to this idea that you need to very carefully think through the kind of long-term implications of your creations. And I think part of that is softening those boundaries as you're describing, making sure that you're including ethicists and historians and philosophers at every kind of stage of the design process. How do you see that relationship between the arts and the sciences going forward?
Well, I think it's all really, really important, and I think it is about us working holistically in order to really make sure that we're going in the right direction. But there's just something else that you've just prompted me to think about, and I think what I really want to do as well is really nurture and encourage people to get involved at young ages as well. It's something, I know it doesn't come under our remit as an example, but I really want to get those stories out and say to people, you can do this. Really there's richness of careers, whether it be in the arts, that really do support a lot of the work that we're doing. So I think for me, one of the most powerful things we can do is really just, when I think about ARIA, capture people's imaginations, but capture imaginations across the whole spectrum as well, not just thinking about a certain focus on, I have to be a professor in a certain place.
And I think also, so for instance, DCMS runs a thing called the Centre for Data Ethics and Innovation, and it was really important to put ethics and innovation together. This is not a sort of philosophers in opposition to innovators. It is about saying that a properly regulated, and I think in almost all cases light touch regulated, but properly regulated sectors allow people and allow businesses to flourish in a way that makes them sustainable as well. And I think we can talk, there are umpteen ways of talking about the same theme, but ultimately it's about saying that predictable, coherent regulation is something that incorporates what is pro-innovation, pro the values that we all share, and makes it something that is sensible and something that is more attractive to invest in, not less. And the same is true where if you talk to a company like Darktrace, for instance, incredibly successful, great British story that lots and lots more people should have heard about, I think. Then you talk to them about who do you want to recruit? They say, yeah, we want great computer scientists. We want great people from the sort of the areas that people would think about when you say cybersecurity. But they also recruit actively brilliant graduates from the arts, and they take them on a journey that perhaps wouldn't immediately be obvious when you said I did an English degree. So I think you've got to be. You've got to bear in mind that there is sometimes a danger that this debate is itself slightly divorced from what's actually going on out there in industry, where there's a huge amount of creativity to try and be more broad-minded.
Okay, so actually on that point about recruiting, Amanda, I just want to, so there's a line from the description of ARIA where it says, the model will give freedom and control to a small number of the highest caliber researchers from public and private spheres. How do you make sure that that group, that small group of people really have that kind of skill set, right? Have that sort of intellectual diversity, the racial diversity, the gender diversity, of the things that we're describing, people who come with that understanding of ethics and innovation as well as the scientific side?
I think that is a brilliant question, and it's a question that I'm really determined that we work our way through, but it's not an easy solution. And one of the things, if anybody is listening or knows anybody, I would encourage, if you know that person, we genuinely want them to come forward. And so we're having a really robust recruitment process, as you would expect. But I don't know, will it be, it may well be somebody that none of us have heard of. And this is the great thing, that I just wanted to reach out and get that inspirational leader, that person who can really take ARIA on the journey that it needs to go. And how we get that person,
it's quite a big ask, isn't it?
So it's a really big, it's really big. But we're just broadening it out as much as we can. And you will see one of the things that we keep on pleasing is that, please, if you know anybody, get them forward, send them to us.
Matt, do you fancy it?
Yes, Matt.
I think the country can do better.
Okay, that's good. I actually wanted to ask Matt about more broadly about your thoughts on that point, really, about diversity within I guess the tech sector, within technology industry. Why is this stuff important?
So I think if you take an example, so Amanda and I jointly do AI, which sounds bizarre in itself, but as a policy area, it's shared between DCMS and BEIS. And what we've tried to do through the various different things that is trying to encourage people into that particular area is yes, to reach out to communities that have historically been underrepresented actively. But what we found is that when you then have got that pool that is more broadly spread across society and looks more like real society, and you then go out to people who want to recruit, they are actively reaching into areas that have historically been underrepresented, not because government is out there saying woohoo's diversity is a great thing, but because they see it as great for their businesses. And I think that sense that particularly in AI, partly because of the nature of it, then diversity is valuable. But across the broader economy, then increasingly what we see is that this is stuff that is driven by businesses, not forced by government. And I think that's a far better way for these things to work. And you've got to sort of, I think that there's that really old-fashioned idea that sort of for women to break through the glass ceiling, then men have to lose out. And I think that's mad. You've got to say that there is a far greater sum of its parts kind of argument. This isn't a zero-sum game, and it's great that we see businesses acknowledging that in increasing numbers. Government has a role to play, I think, in opening up the funnel sometimes, but a lot of the time it is about giving the visibility and allowing business in particular to make its own decisions, because what we see is decisions that are really encouraging.
And I'm just thinking that the challenge is actually that in order to get people who, I'm thinking of the leader that we're really looking for, and that if we want to try and make it as diverse as we possibly can, the problem that we have is challenges of 10 years ago and 20 years ago. And so I just think we have a responsibility now for all of us to really start encouraging. That's why I think about young people as well. But I think it's our collective responsibility to really try and engage with young people. And just give you a really quick example. I had the great privilege, I have a great privilege of meeting many fantastic people. But I met Tim Peake, who of course everybody knows and is fabulous. And I did girl guiding for 20 years because I love kids that much. And he's scouting, but you can imagine me, I just love it, playing with the kids. And he's a scouting ambassador, and we were talking about how important it is to get young people engaged. And I thought no more, said goodbye and thought no more. And then it was just before Christmas, and he sent me a book through the post signed by him to Amanda, Tim. But the really important thing that he did was he sent 3 postcards, and they had my daughter's names on it. So to my blah, blah, and then to my granddaughter, he wrote, "Dear, aim high." Now, what a gift. She's going to grow up with that in her, it's in her room at the minute, but that's the gift that all of us can do, is inspire young people to believe in themselves. And then that will enable us to have that far more diverse field of people that we can select from.
I agree. That's a really nice point. I wanted to talk to you also, Matt, just because we have you, about the AI strategy that is underway at the moment. Is that fair to say? Mm-hmm. What provoked this strategy? Tell us a little bit about it. What is it and what provoked it?
So I think on the one hand, across the country, we've done brilliant things with AI, whether it's DeepMind, which always gets cited, or whether it's a whole host of relatively smaller companies that have done amazing things. On the other hand, AI at the moment, I think, is something where government has a really important role to play, and saying what are the things that are important to government, what are the things that we want to put money behind, that we want to accelerate, that we want to make sure puts the ethics together with the innovation, is a really important thing to be doing. And I'd love to say, and here it is, but we're not quite we're not quite there yet. But making the case for government involvement in a sensible way in an area that is going to shape everyone's lives, I think is really powerful, but also doing it in a way that says, AI, at least in the vast majority of cases in the starting point, maybe think of, you might already own a car, think of AI as like cruise control rather than the thing that is going to replace your car. This is a technology that can augment a lot of what is there already. It is not something that we should necessarily think of as something coming over the hill that is going to replace a whole load of jobs, or indeed that is going to be fundamentally unmanageable. It's something that we can shape in a way that is really positive, and I think also addresses some people's concerns that it will be destroying far more jobs than it creates. Actually, if you look, every industrial revolution is different, obviously, but if you look at all the previous industrial revolutions, they created far more jobs than they destroyed. And that's why reskilling, retraining is so important, because we don't have an army of unemployed blacksmiths hanging around waiting for horses to come back, but we do have a hump, to go back to Neil, but we do have that really important hump period, maybe Neil was a camel, where you can start talking about what is it that's going to be really challenging, what's government's role, and what is the role working with industry to make sure that period is as beneficial as it possibly can be.
I definitely want to meet a camel called Neil. I think that's it's important that we track him down. That's an important point, though, actually, about what government's role is in all of this. Amanda, I think it's fair to say that there is a gap that is increasing between technology and society and regulation, really. I know that Azim was talking about his book. Where is he? There you go. We were talking about your book a couple of days ago, The Exponential Gap, which is a really remarkable read on this very topic. How do we try and mitigate against that gap, which seems only to be going in one direction at the moment?
Well, I guess, and Matt might be a better place to talk about this, but I mean, there are a few things that we are trying to do. And one of the things that I on a regular basis do is try and talk to people, talk to stakeholders, and find out exactly what that gap is. And then, of course, as a government, we have a responsibility to try and fill that gap. And there are many things that, and I'm not privy to all the things that every department's doing, but as an example, one of the things we're doing within BASE is thinking about an innovation strategy. And it's really important that what we're doing is enabling innovation to take place in the country and, of course, internationally as well. And that's all about being mindful about about startups, about scale-ups, about how we really encourage that innovation, how we encourage people to think innovatively. And I think as a government, we really are doing that. We are listening, and we are really thinking about how do we actually bridge that gap. But Matt, you might be better placed on that.
Yeah, so I think I would challenge the idea that there is sort of an inevitability about a widening gap between technology and regulation, because ultimately good regulation is not based on seeing a problem and regulating the problem. It's based on principles that therefore make it somewhat more predictable, and try to guard against some of the incoherence that is sort of inevitable in a new area. And what I think, and this is very much what DCMS is focused on through what we've called the 10 tech priorities, and we'll sort of evolve a little bit in that. But it is about saying there's a lot of regulation coming down the track, whether it's online safety and social networking, whether it's things like the new digital markets unit that the CMA have set up. There's lots of different pieces of this puzzle. And I think it's absolutely important for government to be the sort of shaping architect of this, but also to tell the story, to say this is why we're doing doing in social networking, for instance, and also to say this is what we're doing to try and prevent us having in the future to come back and retrospectively fix some of those problems. I do think it's interesting though that you see so you see Facebook, Twitter, big social networks saying that they welcome regulation. Now, there is whether they welcome, I think what they mean is they would like to shape the regulation, and that's absolutely sensible from their point of view. But everyone agrees that some rules of the road would be beneficial for all of us, and we've got to try and make sure both that we get the rules of the road right in that situation, and also that we, as I say, come up with a situation where we know that there are going to be future roads built, but they are also going to have to abide by some pretty consistent and persistent principles.
Okay, last question from me, and then I think we might have 2 minutes to throw to one question in the audience if anyone has one that's a burning question. Now, one of the big recommendations from the AI roadmap was that in the UK, we'll only really feel the full benefits of AI if all parts of society can really have full confidence in the science. Amanda, how do we do that?
Well, for me,
in one sentence, if
for me, it's all about communication. And if we communicate and articulate really clearly the advantages that we can have from AI, the AI strategy is great as well, for looking forward, then I think it's about communicating and really enabling people not to fear something that there is no need to fear, given we will have regulations, etc. No.
So I think, as Amanda says, a lot of this is about communication. That's absolutely right. But it is a problem if algorithms recognize white faces more than they recognize black faces. There are some fundamental things where we already have quite a lot of legislation in that area. We've got to, and I'm not sort of advocating a right go out and prosecute people, but I do think we've got to be mindful that there are lots of principles that are already really well established, and it is right for companies to pay attention to those established and pretty well universally accepted norms when they are developing those sorts of technologies as well.
Well put, I think. Is there a question from the audience that, yes, go ahead.
One of the previous speakers for the afternoon has been asked a very intriguing question. Would this technology flourishing make the world more equal or less equal? And I think that brings back the issue of diversity, because I wish 2 more ministers were here, the Minister of Education and the Home Office as well, because it all goes down to the school, and then to the university selection, and in the job. And when people are recruited, once they are in the job, you have to retain them. To retain them, you have to motivate them. And in that motivation factor is a career progression. So there are all these factors all along that would impact diversity and make it more deliverable. So I think the quality of any politician is in the narrowness of the gap between what they promise and what they deliver. And how do you promise to do that?
No pressure. There's a separate bit about to what extent should politicians the world over benefit from under-promising and over-delivering, right? That there is a sort of rhetoric gap that we all need to be careful about. But I think more broadly, I think technology has huge power to close that gap in a way that is really, really powerful. I think there is a real danger if we get this regulation wrong that the opposite happens, that we accentuate that divide. And I think the jury is out thus far on whether we can make it work. But what we are doing, I think now, is going into this problem with our eyes more open than they ever have been before. We're going into it saying, where we sit now, diversity is not right. Where we sit now, then the equality of opportunity is not right. How do we, in a way that genuinely benefits as wide a proportion of society as you possibly can, tackle the problems that we've got and shape the regulation for the future? So I can't promise you that we'll succeed, but I can promise you that we're doing it in a way that is far more open and far more cognizant of the inequalities of the world in which we live than it has been before.
Amanda?
Yeah, all of the above, and just thinking about the people and culture strategy. There's no good just producing a strategy that you don't put into action. And I'm really committed to making sure that everything that we put in that strategy, we do also have a plan how to implement it. And I've had many conversations about the strategy, and the reason why we're doing it is because it's the right thing to do. And that's why I have every confidence that we will lead to a better, more diverse society in R&D from the roadmap.
Well, let's hope.
Let's hope so.
And I think that's a good point
Yes.
to end on. Thank you very much to both of you indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.